Hey everyone, thanks again for watching. My name is Nathan Jones, and today I'm going to be talking about deregulation in the free market. So, what is a free market? Well, we have countries with a lot of economic freedom and countries with very little economic freedom. And you have countries like the United States has a lot of economic freedom, Singapore has a lot of economic freedom, um, you know, a lot of first world countries have a fair amount of economic freedom. Chile, um, and one thing that seems to go hand in hand with economic freedom is wealth. So let's talk about deregulation a little bit. There's some complaints going around that I've heard about the housing market being rather lousy, although it has been booming lately. Here in the United States, it's hard for first-time homeowners to find an affordable place to stay. Um, and raise a family, you know. Well, why is this? Well, let me talk a little about how regulation affects prices and how it actually is not beneficial to us at all. So, first of all, regulation is created by the government's bureaucracy, which are government agencies like the EPA, the FDA, a bunch of other ones, OSHA, and they make regulations that have the power of law, and they are not accountable to the American voter. So if the EPA says that you can get charged $36,000 per day for owning a property and building on a wetland until you vacate the property and with very little pay, eminent domain, for example, the American voter doesn't hold them accountable. They make regulations that have the power of laws, and they are not accountable to the American voter. So let me talk a little bit about how that affects prices. Well, consider a house. Let's go back to the early 1900s, okay? Back before we had all these, housing regulations, keeping things up to code. That's what causes prices to go up, is when you make things more and more complex. Oh, houses have to have this, houses have to have that, you have to have an electrical outlet every 10 feet or whatever, or you have to have carbon monoxide detector on every level of your house, or smoke detector in every room of your house, and all these regulations. And there's structural regulations too. You have to do certain designs to the structure to make sure the house is safe. Not a bad idea, but let me talk about how the free market will handle this. So say Company A and Company B both build houses. Company A builds a house, and they're very stingy with the stuff they make it with. It's very cheap, not very high quality, but they're cheap. Well, people live there, find out that the houses are not good, and they're paying too much for it, perhaps. Whereas Company B competes with Company A, provides better service for the same price. Who's going to get more business? Clearly, Company B. So let me talk a little bit more how this works with another thing: cars. Back, let's say 1960s, cars were fairly affordable. You could buy a brand new car for a few $1,000s. And today, I'll give you an example. The cheapest car on the market here in the United States is the Nissan Versa for about $12,000. And, well, the Nissan Versa is like the most base model, junky compact car you can possibly buy. You can buy a hatchback, which is a little more expensive, maybe a little bit nicer, but it's still just as awful looking, right? Well, so the Nissan Versa is the cheapest car in the United States currently, as of 2017. And 2018 is also still $12,000. Why have prices gone up? Well, let me talk a little bit about some things that the government's agency, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, have implemented. Let's go back to the 1990s, where we had the catalytic converter. what was the catalytic converter? Well, it was this device made out of platinum that was placed inside the exhaust of every car, and it would take out pollutants like carbon monoxide, the oil, all the pollutants that come out of the exhaust when you run your engine. And well, they did that until they found out that the catalytic converters were actually emitting toxic fumes of their own, and they cut that out pretty quickly. What did they do? Well, platinum isn't cheap. It added to the prices of the cars. Also in the early 90s, the airbags. Airbags were mandated in every car, even though they didn't have them before, and they weren't necessarily safe at the time. But the government came along and said all new cars must have airbags starting at this year or whatever. Prices go up because all cars have airbags, and they're not necessarily safe either, so there was an issue with that, government interfering with the free market. And let's take a look at a more modern example. 2018, this year, all cars are required to have a backup camera. Why? I don't need a backup camera. The car I'm driving doesn't have a backup camera. I mean, I've driven a car with a backup camera and I never use it. It's personal preference, but now the government's saying, well, it's a safety feature to have a backup camera. I have a back window. But either way, the government's mandating that every new car in the United States has a backup camera. Fairly cheap technology, but all these add up. Anti-lock brakes is another example. Traction control, vehicle stability control. All these features that are nice features are adding to the price of the car. Now, what if we deregulated that and said companies can sell a car? If they want to sell a super cheap, junk car, let them sell it. If people like it, they can buy it. If people say, no, it's a junk car, I'm not going to buy it, well, that's up to them. Let me quote George W. Bush and talk to you another thing about cars with the famous bailout of especially GM and Chrysler. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but President Bush, supposedly a Republican, stated that it is the government's role to aid the economic well-being of the country as a whole. Yeah, no. And so he provided a bailout to both GM and Chrysler. I think it was like $3.8 billion each. And they had until May of 2009 to make good use out of it. And if they didn't, they'd have to pay it back. Well, GM and Chrysler both made good use of their $3.8 billion or whatever it was they were given. And, yeah, they stayed in business. So let's just say regulations don't save lives. Common sense does. I saw this meme one time on Facebook that two libertarians walk into a bar. The bar catches on fire and they both die because they're in an alternate universe where Ron Paul is president and fire codes have been abolished. What logic is that following? Since when have fire codes saved lives? Wasn't it the common sense that the fire codes, enforced? I had this guy tell me one time that certain regulations are good, like if you're a window washer in the middle of a city, skyscraper city, you're up on a skyscraper 100 feet up washing windows. The regulation says you have to be harnessed in if you're doing that. Good regulation. Really? Isn't that common sense? Shouldn't you be free to go up 100 feet without a harness and risk your life if you so choose? Of course. It doesn't make sense for the government to punish you for putting yourself in danger, just like it doesn't make sense for the government, the police officers, to punish you, give you a ticket for driving without a seatbelt. Who are you harming? Yourself. Another meme, I'm quoting memes a lot on this video, but a meme about how getting pulled over by the police is no different than armed robbery if it's for your safety. So a man gets pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt, like me. I'm not driving yet. I will put my seatbelt on. I'm smart. Man gets pulled over for driving without a seatbelt, and the officer asks him, "Do you know why you're getting a ticket?" And the man says, "No. Why am I getting a ticket?" Because you were, excuse me, because you were driving without a seatbelt. the man driving. Why is that illegal? The officer, because it's for your safety. Okay. What if I resist and don't pay the ticket? Then I will get you an arrest warrant and take you to court. Well, what if I resist you? Then I will pull out my gun and force you to come to court with me. What if I pull out my gun in self-defense? I will shoot you. Tell me again, officer. Wasn't this for my safety? Think about it. So if we deregulate things, life will be cheaper. The housing market will be doing better because there are more options for more people. Cars will be more affordable and they're brand new. And guess what? People will be just as well off. I mean, people survived through the 1800s when we didn't have all this government regulation. You look at how big the regulations and the government bureaucracy has grown. You know, even just the past, century is unbelievable. So, you say that we need more government regulations and stuff to manage the economy. Think about the people you're affecting by those, because you're not accountable to them, and you're just driving the prices up, and eventually our economy is going to be rather poor because less economic freedom equals more poverty. Thank you for watching.